Welcome to the Schuby Show, where sports, movies, TV shows, technology, history, and more come to life. Now, please be seated and get ready for some more never-ending nonsense with yours truly, Schuby.
This is the Schuby Show with yours truly, Carson Schubert. And today on the show, I have a very special guest. We always have special guests when we have guests on the show. And this week we have a professional sports bettor. And you can follow him on Twitter at SteamCapper1. And Steam, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I'm enjoying being inside. It's kind of a windy day outside right now, so it's kind of nice to be inside in the warmth. So, but how are you doing? And what's going on? I'm sure you've been watching a lot of these. October, obviously, one of the biggest sports months of the year, with football and baseball and basketball starts up at the end of the month. So what you been doing with all your time?
Right, yeah, so exactly. I've been it's been pretty hectic following all the sports and sort of keeping on top of things. So this is probably the busiest time of the year for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I want to do, Steam, is kind of tell the audience here what got you into sports betting, and why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, so I got into sports betting by happenstance. I went to a prep school in high school, and all these kids were betting on sports, and I never knew about a point spread, never knew about a total prior to that. But just, I guess, my personality, when I see something, I figure it's beatable, and there's, it's intellectually stimulating. It grabs my attention. So that was sort of how initially I got exposed to sports betting, and then I was always pretty serious about it. And then probably my later years of college is when I really started basically exploiting bookmakers and increasing my bet size and taking it more seriously. And then I've been doing it professionally for about the last 3 years.
Yeah, and you mentioned to me that you totally live off the income of being a professional sports bettor now. So listeners, he's pretty good at what he does.
I appreciate that.
A lot of, including myself, I'm sure a lot of people maybe don't know a lot of the details of sports betting. I mean, an average person probably knows what the spread is and that kind of thing, and what team to bet on if Vegas gives you these kind of odds or that kind of thing. But there is a lot more depth into it than probably an average sports bettor sees, I would imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say is maybe one of the big things that people maybe don't do right away when they're looking at a game? They maybe look over something when they're betting on just a regular game.
Right, and so I think the biggest misconception for just beginners is that they think that because they know the players, because they watch SportsCenter, and because they know the sport, that translates into them being profitable sports bettors. And so that's not the case. I mean, there's guys that used to play in the NBA, and so they arguably know the sport better than anyone, but they're not profitable sports bettors. So I think the biggest distinction to make is knowing the sport and being able to beat it on betting, like being able to beat the sports book. So there's a big distinction between those two.
So what would you say to a person who's just starting out sports betting? I mean, obviously, you said It's not necessarily knowing the players. What does it really take
Right.
to actually be a good sports bettor? I mean, obviously, without giving away your secret sauce, so
Right.
to speak, what does it take to actually get this? Is it analytics? Is it just really looking at every minor detail? What is it?
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely. I don't think you can point to one trait and say this is what it takes. Right. It's more how the whole handicapping process is how you tie everything together. But for someone just starting, I think the most important thing is keeping limits low and being attentive. So over time, you're going to learn some tricks just by virtue of the fact that you've been doing it for a while. So initially, I would say keep limits low. Make sure to line shop. That's the biggest thing that most players don't do. And what I mean by that is if you have one website where you place bets, have at least 3, and then pick place your bet on the website that gives you the best odds. So for example, if you have the Detroit Lions or let's say +5 at one sports book, and in another book you have it +6, if you just had one sports book and that number was hanging +5, you would bet that. But by virtue of having multiple books, you're able to line shop. And so over the course of the season, like half point and 1 point differences, it may not seem significant, but over the course of the season, that might be, 5, 10, 15 wins. So it's definitely, over the course of the season, it definitely makes a big difference. So that's number one thing. Manage your bankroll, keep limits low, and line shop. Those are things that take no additional effort as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just basically having an account, and there's nothing. Usually, I don't think there's many that charge just to have an account, right?
No, none of them charge actually.
Yeah, okay, and that just goes to show how much I know. But looking into it a little bit deeper, what as you kind of become a beginner, maybe there's some people that have done sports betting for a while, and maybe they're decent at it, but they feel like maybe they could make more money off of what they're doing. What would
Right.
you say? What would you say to them? What do they need to improve on? Maybe.
Right. So I think the biggest thing that would probably make the biggest difference in terms of success is being able to decide which factors actually help in predicting the outcome of the game. And so what I mean by that is I'll give you a sort of a simple, let's say I'll just give a simple illustration. So let's say running back A. So ESPN throws stats all the time. Let's say running back A, when he has 20 carries, they win 90% of the time. And then you hear the coach say that they plan on giving running back A 20 carries. So if you put two and two together, you're saying, okay, when this guy carries the ball 20 times, they win 90% of the time. And the coach said that he's going to get 20 carries, so there's a 90% chance, or a pretty good chance at least, that he's going to win. And so the problem, at a superficial glance, that looks like pretty sound logic, but the problem with that is for that statement to be true, the running back A carrying the ball is what's causing the win. Whereas I could argue that because they're winning, they're giving him the ball to bleed the clock, right?
Right.
So if you're up by 21, you're not going to be throwing the ball. You just hand it off, bleed the clock. So it wasn't the running back skill that won the game. It was you were already winning and you were just sitting on the win. That's a different way to approach the game, right? I mean, that's not something that everyone would think about initially. And so avoiding the traps of stats that look good but really have no meaning to it, I think that's the most important thing for a new bettor to understand.
How much do you put stock into whether a team is home or away?
Right. Yeah. So that's a big difference in the NFL. I think in college, home field advantage is a little more important. But it definitely, makes a difference. So what I do is I have a home field advantage for each team, right? And so not all home field advantages are equal, right? So I think a home field advantage at Green Bay or the Cowboys or even Arrowhead, right, for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot more valuable than say a home field advantage for the Browns or the Jaguars or
right.
So they're not. You can like what they did back in the day was assign 3 points for a home field advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty it's pretty outdated notion now. So some teams I do have 3. I mean, Pittsburgh is a tough place to play. Green Bay is a tough place to play. But other stadiums it might just be 1.5 points. Mm. So it'll vary. But that's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration.
And I mean, Vegas, they take it into consideration when they're doing this. Like a lot of teams say, you're basically gonna if you get like 3-point favorites, you're basically saying that it's pretty much a toss up, and you're giving that team the win because they're at home. Is that kind of right to some extent?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So the way I conduct my analysis is, okay, how would these teams compare on a neutral field, and then adjust for home field advantage.
Okay. So
and you have to adjust for bye weeks as well later on in the season, right? So teams have more rest. Typically a bye week is worth a point to a point and a half.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, and looking at tonight's Thursday night game for NFL, for example, Carolina is favored by 3 against Philadelphia, and I think this is going to be a very good game. To be honest, with the listeners here and everybody else, and who knows, by the time some people are listening to it, it'll probably be not Thursday. But I think this will be a good game. But Carolina is favored by 3, and do you think that's strictly because they're at home, or do you think there's anything else that goes in with that?
Right. So I think right now, if you're an Eagles fan, this is the worst time to be an Eagles backer, right? So they have some momentum, and unfortunately, so when a team has momentum, you have to pay for that, right? Yeah. Because if everyone's going to bet it, the sportsbooks will adjust accordingly. So the value here is definitely on the Panthers. At home, good defense. They can run the ball. It's a solid team, right? I think top to bottom, the most underrated teams right now probably are the Arizona Cardinals after a couple tough losses. Carolina Panthers, and Baltimore Ravens, actually. So those are 3 teams that are on the radar for me. So I'll definitely I'll be a Panthers fan tonight.
Okay, yeah, I was actually kind of leaning towards Philadelphia because I feel like a lot of people choose Carolina just because they beat Detroit last week on the road, and they're a really good team. And I mean, both teams really are on a roll. Right. So it really is a toss-up.
They beat Detroit, and they beat the Patriots as 10-point dogs.
Yeah, that's true too. And I guess I do understand where a lot of people are saying the Eagles have only they've beaten teams that are like 500 or below so far. Is that
right? Yeah, I don't remember offhand. I mean, I do remember they needed a 61-yarder or whatnot to beat the Giants, who are just probably the most dysfunctional team in the league right now. So
yeah,
they beat Arizona, which is not Arizona. I mean, Arizona's a good team, so I'm more impressed with their win at home against Arizona. But I think traveling on Thursday night to it's a short week, traveling to Carolina, which is not an easy place to play. And then the Carolina team looks good. They beat Detroit on the road. They beat New England on the road. So those are good teams. I think Carolina is definitely the right side here.
I think I heard somebody say this recently, that if you take if you have 2 teams on a short week, like for a Thursday night game, a lot of people like to take the better coach in that situation. And I don't know if that has any influence on betting or not, but I think a lot of people like to take the better coach, and I think most people would probably say Ron Rivera is probably a slightly better coach, if not more, just depending on your thoughts on Doug Peterson, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good bromide, but I don't think that necessarily works in all situations. But I think it's a good rule of thumb.
Right.
So I think I like tougher teams on short weeks, right? On short weeks I definitely like mentally tough teams, and it's a little nicer on a short week to come back home than on a short week going on the road. So,
right.
So the home field advantage on a short week is definitely a point to a point and a half more than home field advantage on a full week.
Right. So taking a look maybe at some other sports, we talk a little bit about the NFL. What would you say are some differences when you're looking at the NFL, obviously, and you look at baseball? There's obviously probably more analytics that go into baseball than the NFL.
Right.
What are some of the main differences you would say when you're trying to bet on baseball compared to football, for example?
Right. Okay. So I think baseball is the most better friendly sport. The reason why is it's a long season. That's number one. Two, the bookmakers hold on baseball is the least. So you can get 8-cent lines, you can get 10-cent lines for baseball, which means it has the lowest juice. But the problem with that is because it's basically every day. If you don't watch yourself, it could turn out to be a problem. So if you're a winning bettor, baseball is the best sport to play. If you're a losing player because you can play every day, it's not the best sport to play. But you're right. So football is more thematic. Baseball is almost all analytics.
Mm-hmm.
But I think baseball a couple of seasons ago when teams were employing this a lot more. Now it's pretty much standard. But probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was difficult for a lot of bettors to incorporate because the shift data was not as plentiful as it is now. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot of models just had a hiccup then, but I think now baseball is definitely the best sport to bet on. Followed closely by college basketball.
College basketball. Yeah,
right.
That's also interesting, especially once you get to tournament time. Do you look at a lot of different analytics when it comes to tournament time?
Yeah, so tournament time I think is in a lot of ways it's so there's pluses and minuses. Most of my money is not made during March Madness, believe it or not, because by that time the lines are pretty efficient. And although there's a lot of public money that can distort lines, I think there's a lot of information on the teams. For the most part, these are well-known teams, right? Come to Sweet 16, Elite Eight. Whereas most of your money, and this is what I encourage all people, everyone who's just trying to make a profit betting sports, is to focus on the leagues that there's not that much information about. So, for example, don't focus on Duke games or Kansas. Those lines, there's a lot of information about the teams, and therefore uncovering information that most people don't know about is a lot tougher. So, what I would encourage new bettors to do is focus on a specific conference, focus on the smaller teams like Richmond, St. Bonaventure, Dayton. Those smaller teams that don't have as much coverage, those lines are softer because they know. So if you think about it from the bookmaker's perspective, they know a lot of people are going to be betting the Duke games, the Kansas games, Notre Dame. So they're going to put a disproportionate amount of time making sure that their lines are right for the marquee games where they're going to have a huge betting handle, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to put up a bad line on a game where a lot of people are going to bet it. But the smaller teams like Cal State Fullerton, like a lot of those Cal State Northridge, a lot of those smaller schools, a lot of people aren't betting those games, so they put less time into making sure those lines are correct, and because they put less time, it's a bettor is better off trying to pick those games apart as opposed to trying to find an edge in marquee schools.
Okay. So maybe compare baseball to basketball. Obviously, basketball you need a lot of analytics too. What would you say you need? You need more analytics probably for baseball than basketball, though.
That's tough to say. I would say if I had to pick, I would probably say baseball. You would have to have more analytics. Just because you know the lineup, and it's more easy to model, right? Because essentially what it comes out to is pitcher versus batter. Whereas in basketball, it's not quite so simple. It's more of a complex system, right. And complex systems are harder to model. But I think the benefit of basketball is at the most one play can be 4 points, right? If you make a three and you get fouled on a three, you make the free throw, that's 4 points. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe 4%, 5% of the total points scored by a team. So one play has at most 5%. At most it affects the outcome of the game by 5% of the scoring. Whereas in football, one play could be 30% of the scoring, right? If you have a pick six or something like that in a low scoring game, that's 30% of the scoring. And for baseball as well, sometimes if you have, a fly ball that's caught on the warning track versus, a couple feet from going out, that at one swing could be a huge difference in the game. So in terms of having one play that affects the outcome of the game, basketball is the best sport, right? Because one play is not going to affect the outcome of the game as much as it might in football or baseball. So from that perspective, it's nice, but the NBA is there are some spots you can uncover value, but it's a difficult sport as well.
What would you say for tonight's wild card game? Obviously, it's a big winner go home game. The Nationals and the Cubs. I don't even know who's actually starting for each team tonight. I haven't looked at that yet, but
I think it's Hendricks and Gio Gonzalez.
Oh my! So this, to me, that sounds like it could go either way, really.
Yeah. That's what the market's saying. It's basically both teams are at minus 105 right now. The Nationals they opened yesterday as an underdog, and now it's basically both teams are minus 105. So the early action came in on Washington, which I think is probably correct. I like Washington as a dog at pick here. I'd probably lean towards the under, and the reason why, the Cubs have a better bullpen. Not the weather. I actually live in DC. There's a bit overcast conditions, so I don't think the ball's going to fly off the bat. And because it's winner take all, both these starting pitchers are going to be on a short leash, so they might go to the bullpen early, have fresh arms. So that's something that would lean towards the under.
Yeah, like I said, this game could really literally go any way. The Cubs, it looks like they have the Cubs minus 110 right now on the score, which they post the odds on there, and I don't know. Obviously, like you said, different bookies have different odds.
Right.
So you said you were kind of taking the Nationals if they were considered dogs. Would you still take the Nationals there, probably?
Yeah, it's the Nationals. So if I got plus 110 on the Nationals, I definitely would take the Nationals. Right now, at current prices, I can't back them. I'm leaning towards the under. And yeah, so as of right now, I'm leaning towards the under. It should be a good game.
Yeah. So tell me the differences here. Obviously, football for tonight's game, you have -3, but then for baseball, you have minus 110. And what does that 110 actually mean? Like, I honestly really don't know what that means.
Right. Okay. So minus 110, those are what's called American odds. So what that means is when you see a minus, that means you have to. So a minus 110 means you bet 110 to win 100. So if you want to win $100, you have to risk 110. And then so if it was plus 110, that's the exact opposite. You risk $100, and that ticket's going to pay 110.
Okay.
So whenever you see a plus odds, that's indicative of a dog. And so so in that case you risk 100 to win 110. But obviously, I mean, your bet size can be whatever, and it'll be the payouts will be adjusted accordingly. But that's with one.
So when you have the minus by the team, like if it's the Cubs minus 110, that means they're taking the Cubs to win. If they said plus 110, then they would be taking the Nationals to win. Would that be right?
Yeah, Nationals are expected to win, right?
Okay.
In that case.
Okay. So yeah, that's basically the difference between plus and minus. If you put the minus by one team, or if you put the plus by one team, that's basically the team they're taking to win, right?
Right.
Okay. And then you have when you look at these games, you have a T, and then for the football game tonight, it's T44, and then there's for the baseball game, it's T7.5. What is that?
So that's the total. So there's three pretty much three standard ways to bet. So the first one is money line, which you're just betting who's going to win. That's pretty simple. Then the T is total. You're betting on the total number of
points scored,
of points or runs or goals,
runs,
whatever.
Right.
Scored in the game, and that's by both teams. So you have. It doesn't matter who scores a run or when he scores a run. You're just betting on the total number of runs scored by both teams. So then there's another thing called a team total, which you're just betting on the total number of runs, points, goals, whatever, scored by a specific team. And then the spread obviously is a bet on by how much they win by.
Right. So yeah, no, I knew that. I'm just asking you to tell the audience members who might not know what that is. And I mean, obviously, if you've gambled sports bet before, I'm sure you probably know what that is. But for a regular person just looking through the games, they might not know what that means. And maybe they don't know even what the -110 or -3 means.
Right.
Right. But yeah, no, that is. So what kind of do you usually try and bet the scores of the game, or do you try and bet the total points, or do you do a little bit of both, just depending on what you think really could go in either direction? Or
Right. Yeah. So the answer is I bet whatever I feel gives me the edge. So that can be money line, total, or spread. I mean, I basically use all. Depending on the situation, I'll bet all three options. So yeah, I'm not just a point spread player. I'm not just a money line player. I'm not just a total spreader. Whatever I feel I have the edge, I'm not afraid to make that bet.
So you're not a straight edge player. So when people come to your Twitter account, again, Steam Capper1 on Twitter, they can actually buy advice and tips and that kind of thing from you. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So you can, again, follow him on Twitter at SteamCapper1. If you need gambling advice on a game or whatever it might be. Last night you made a correct prediction on, I don't even know what league that was or what type of a game that was. But talk a little bit about, maybe you made more than one correct prediction last night. But I think there was a few people that were happy that they got the advice from you.
Yeah, so last night it was 2-1. I played MLS, NHL, and baseball as well. So I was on the Yankees. So in terms of the service I do, I mean, I cover basically all major sports, including some of the sports that like golf or soccer that aren't that popular in the U.S. So I basically cover it all. And then I employ a 1 to 3 unit scale. So what that is essentially what it boils down to is I bet more on the games I'm more confident about. And so if I bet let's say a $100 play, I would bet 100 on a 1 unit play. They would bet 200 on a 2 unit play and 300 on a 3 unit play. And so the 100 unit player is typically the player that I cater to. But I mean, as you said, I do post a lot of free plays and stuff like that. So it's I'd like to think that no matter what your bankroll is, I think I'm worth a follow.
Okay.
So in other words, there's a ton of stuff I put out that is free of charge. I mean, you don't need a subscription to enjoy those.
Right. So let's take a look quickly here at college football. You kind of gave your thoughts on the baseball and the NFL games tonight. Let's take a look at college football here once. Maybe some of these top 25 games. For example, how about Washington State at California at Cal? That is tomorrow night, actually.
Right.
And Washington's favored by 15. That looks like a pretty straightforward pick, right?
Yeah, I actually think I think 15 is a lot there. I still have to do some work. Guns ahead right now, I'd probably take the points with Cal. But I still have some work to do. So I may end up on Washington State, or I may not play the game at all.
So how would you classify that? So in that case, you would take Cal, but when you have a team like Alabama who's favored by 31 and they almost never lose, you're maybe not going to take the points in that scenario.
Right. So I think one of the hardest things, right, is for people to understand is, okay, if I take Cal plus 15, that doesn't necessarily mean I think that I expect them to win, right? I mean,
right.
Gun to the head, I would have to say, Washington State should win the game, but the point spread is a great equalizer. So given enough points, I would bet, an atrocious team versus, a Clemson or Alabama. But I mean, I would have to have enough points for it to garner my attention.
All right. So you kind of said that. What would you say? Do you have any free plays possibly for college football this week?
Sure. So tonight I'm going to be on Louisiana Lafayette under 54.5.
Okay.
And so that's tonight. Looking further a week on Saturday. These are just leans. There's nothing I'm on yet. I think Northwestern -3 against the Maryland team. Maryland's decent. They're at home, but Northwestern, top to bottom, is clearly a better squad. So I think -3 for Northwestern is something to look at. Michigan -7 at Indiana. So I think at -6.5, I don't expect the line to get a -6.5. You can always buy a half point, but Michigan's coming off a tough loss to Michigan State. They'll likely be angry. Solid defense. I think Michigan -7 is the way to go. Another game. So Oklahoma, Texas. So that should be fun. Texas is an 8-point dog at home. At first glance, I don't think 8's enough. I mean, I like OU. They looked horrible last week, losing a 30-plus point favorite to Iowa State. I mean, they're much more talented. They have the best player on the field. I think Oklahoma -8 is the way to go here.
Just out of curiosity, did you have Iowa State beating Oklahoma?
No, not at all. No. I didn't play the game at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't play the game, but that was definitely a big shock.
How about the Michigan State game? Did you bet on that one at all?
So I almost pulled the trigger on Michigan State at plus 10. I didn't end up keeping that, unfortunately.
Oh man, I'm sure you're probably kicking yourself after that one then.
Right. Yeah, it was. I think. So typically in rivalry games in college, and getting 10 points is a lot. So that's another good rule of thumb. Like rivalry games, 10 points is typically a little excessive. But in this case, I should have taken the points, but I was a little gun shy.
All right. Any free plays, other free plays for maybe the NFL or baseball or any of those?
So I have something I really like for baseball. So I had earlier in the season, I had Dodgers at 12-1 to win it all. I'm still sticking with that thesis. I think, by far and away, they have the best pitching staff. And they have some pretty good bats as well. Yeah. Postseason pitching wins games. They have, in my eyes, they have the best closer in the game. I mean, I guess you could argue that Kimbrel might be a little bit better, but certainly he's the best closer in the of the teams that remain.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So Dodgers win the National League is you can get at minus 140. So that means you're betting 140 to win 100. And so no matter who they play, either Washington or the Cubs, they're much better team than both of them. I think the Dodgers would prefer to play the Cubs. They match up a little bit better than in the Nationals. I think the Nationals have a slight edge in the starting pitchers. But either way, risking 140 to 100 on Dodgers, it should be closer to 180 to 100. I love the Dodgers in that series. Astros Yankees. That's a tough one to call. I mean, I think Astros should win handily, but the current price is not worth warranting a bet. So Dodgers win National League, and depending on the price I get for the World Series, I will probably take Dodgers as well to win there.
Yeah. No, I would really love to see a Dodgers-Astros World Series. That would be a lot of fun to watch.
Right. I was hoping to get Kershaw Kluber, like have two of those matches in the World Series.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, but I think that would have been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. How about any games in the NFL? Is there any games that you really, really like in the NFL this week?
I do. So let's see. I think probably what's going to be my biggest bet this weekend is Arizona +2. So they're at home against the Bucks. Bucks, I think, played last Thursday night, so they have a long week, but they are on the road. Arizona is top to bottom. Arizona is, I think, top 5 most talented squad in the league. They haven't been playing like that, but I think they get the job done at home. I like Arizona to win outright. Another one that may not seem it's a little tough to pull the trigger on this, but a lot of the times the bets that you feel it in your stomach before you play is typically the right side.
Right.
So Pittsburgh Steelers +4.5 against the Chiefs. Chiefs are at home. 5-0. They look great. Pittsburgh looked horrible last week against Jacksonville.
Right.
But 4.5 points in the NFL, I think, is a lot. Chiefs have good home field advantage, but I have to roll with Steelers plus the points here.
I agree. I without even getting into like the Vegas odds or anything, I just kind of felt like, okay, Kansas City just got to 5-0. They're feeling really high on themselves. They're going back home. But then they play Pittsburgh, who's just got off a terrible game. Oh, you're thinking they're not good anymore. I feel like this is a good game for Pittsburgh to bounce back and make a statement.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a trap game almost. Like the Vikings had kind of a trap game last year when they were 5-0 and they played the Eagles. I'm sure you probably maybe you didn't even do this game, but I'm sure you probably took the Eagles in that game when the Vikings were 5-0 last year.
Oh God, I can't comment just because I don't remember. This is quite a while back.
Yeah, I know that was, but this kind of has that same feel to it. Kansas City,
right.
Kansas City. I think they started out 5-0. I thought they said one other time, and then they missed the playoffs or something like that. So, and the Vikings obviously did that last year. Started 5-0 and then finished 3-8. So I mean, anything can happen, especially in the NFL. You get another team that's on a roll, or your team goes crash into the ground all of a sudden. Anything really can happen.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts? You don't have to necessarily give me a full prediction here, but what are your thoughts on Green Bay and Minnesota this weekend? Green Bay favored by 3, according to what I see here.
Yeah, so I think that's a tough one. One is pretty much close to where it is. Minnesota is not an easy place to play. I think Packers probably are getting a little too much respect after beating Dallas on the road. At plus 3.5, I like the Vikings. At minus 2.5, I'd probably take the Packers. So, it is a tight line. I'll see how it moves, but I think at 3.5, certainly at 4, I like Minnesota.
But anything below 3, you're taking Green Bay.
I would look towards Green Bay at that point. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
3 is the key number. 3 is the biggest number in NFL. So 3 and 7 are key numbers. 3, I think, is definitely more of a key number than 7.
Mm. All right. Any last thoughts? Any last tips or tricks or advice for some of these gamblers that maybe are out here trying to make some money before we wrap up the show here?
Right. So I think just a couple tips right off the bat is, manage your bankroll appropriately. Have multiple sports books so you can shop for the best lines. Make full use of bonus deposit offers. I think that is critical. That's free money, basically. So if you're starting out trying to go a roll, you might as well take advantage of those offers. If you're following a handicapper, I don't think that's a bad idea. If 3 handicappers are a good number to follow, 20 handicappers is not a good number to follow. So just pick a handful that you trust, see how they do, and I would probably stick to them, and just stay disciplined. And then the biggest advice, if you have the time, is hyper focus on one small division and the smaller schools, and really try and pick those smaller schools apart and just be an expert in a couple small schools, principally for college basketball. So that's a lot of those times those markets are less efficient. Another way is we didn't touch on is betting on props. So what player props are is, for example, you can say, okay, the number of touchdowns Aaron Rodgers throws, or the number of passing yards he throws for rushing yards. And so those the limits on those sports books are a lot smaller. And so one thing is, if the sports book imposes a smaller limit, they're conceding that it's possible for them to beat them, right? So if they don't have a lot of faith in their numbers, the first thing they're going to do is limit the amount you can bet. And when you're just starting off, a $500 limit is I don't think you're encumbered by limits there. So look, player props, low limits, and just try and squeak out as many edges as you can. So I think the last piece of advice I'd like to give is encourage people to just bet on games where they have a thesis. If you have good analysis and you really feel strong about a bet, you feel like you have an edge, it's absolutely okay to make a bet in a situation like that. What you want to steer clear from is betting a game just because it's on ESPN or just because it's Sunday night football, Sunday night baseball. Those situations, when you're betting for action, is typically when you can sort of dig yourself in a hole. So just stay disciplined, stick to games where you think you have an edge, and over time you should realize a profit.
So back to prop betting. I know you talked about that. Is there a certain prop bet that you maybe like for tonight, for baseball or the NFL game tonight potentially?
I would have. Unfortunately, I haven't done my prop work yet. Okay. I don't want to, go on a whim and when I haven't done the research.
Oh, that's
but
right.
I certainly do before market games. If I feel like I have an edge, I post most of my prop bets out for free.
Okay.
So those are prop bets. For the most part, I'm betting myself, and those are all free. So
all right.
Anyone who's following can use that information how they see fit.
Yeah, and again, follow Steam Capper on Twitter at SteamCapper1. And Steam, it's been very educational. Probably more education than I've received in school in the last month, maybe.
I appreciate that.
maybe that'll be in your future. Having a gambling school of gambling.
That's interesting. I mean, I might have to look into that.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and have a good weekend of bets.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.
You bet. Appreciate you coming on. Again, that is Steam Capper. You can follow him on Twitter at SteamCapper1. That is going to do it for the Schuby Show for this week. We'll be back again next week, and go Vikings. Hopefully, I might have to put some money on that Vikings if I can get the right bet, and hopefully the Vikings can win. Obviously, the Twins season is done, so I can't cheer for the Twins anymore. But the Yankees are still in the playoffs, so I can cheer for them to lose. So hopefully they can lose to the Astros, and we can get an Astros-Dodgers World Series. That's going to do it for the show this week. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Schuby Show. We hope you mildly enjoyed yourself with more never-ending nonsense with yours truly. For more nonsense, go to the website, theschubyshow.com. Get the show on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Until next time, Skol.